The tears streamed down Violet Turner's face as her groom, Arthur Holloway, laughed at her distress, his cruel guffaw echoing through the small church in Placitas, New Mexico. It was June 1875, and what should have been the happiest day of her 20-year-old life had transformed into a nightmare of public humiliation. "You really thought I'd marry you," Arthur sneered, his voice carrying to every corner of the church. A penniless seamstress with nothing but a ramshackle cabin and debts to her name. This was always a wager, my dear one, that I've now won. Violet stood frozen in her simple white dress, a creation she'd spent months perfecting with her own hands, now feeling like a fool's costume. The gathered townsfolk most invited by Arthur's wealthy family whispered and pointed. Her small handful of friends looked on in horror. "Arthur, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "We talked about our future together. A future." He laughed again, the sound like breaking glass to her ears. "The only future was the $50 I just earned by bringing you to the altar and leaving you there. Thank you for making it so easy." With that, he turned and strode down the aisle, leaving Violet standing alone, abandoned before she'd even had the chance to say her vows. The minister, a visiting preacher from Santa Fe, looked uncomfortably at his Bible, unsure of how to proceed. Violet couldn't breathe. The church walls seemed to close in, the whispers growing louder. She gathered her skirts and fled, pushing past the heavy wooden doors and into the harsh New Mexico sunlight. She ran blindly, not caring where her feet took her, just needing to escape the laughter and pity that followed in her wake. She found herself at the edge of town, near the livery stables, her chest heaving with sobs. Collapsing onto a wooden bench, she buried her face in her hands. The beautiful day mocked her pain, clear blue skies, warm sunshine, and the distant mountains standing tall and indifferent to her suffering. "Miss, are you all right?" The voice was deep and gentle, tinged with a southern drawl. Violet didn't look up, too ashamed to show her tear-streaked face. "Please, just leave me alone," she managed between sobs. Instead of footsteps retreating, she heard the creak of the bench as someone sat beside her. A handkerchief, clean but well-worn, appeared in her line of sight. "My ma always said a good cry needs a proper handkerchief," the voice said. "Otherwise, those pretty sleeves get all stained." Despite herself, Violet took the offered cloth and finally looked up. The man beside her was not from Placitas. She would have remembered him. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy. Denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed kind eyes the color of warm amber. His face was tanned from the sun, with the beginnings of laugh lines around his eyes. Despite his apparent youth, he couldn't be more than 25. "Thank you," she murmured, dabbing at her eyes. "Name's Ryder Whitlock," he said, not pushing for details about her tears. "Just rode in from Texas looking for work." "Violet Turner," she replied automatically, her voice still trembling. She stopped, unable to explain the spectacle she'd just been part of. "The bride," he finished for her, nodding at her white dress. "I heard some commotion at the church as I was passing." His expression darkened slightly. "And I saw a fancied-up gentleman laughing with his friends at the saloon, boasting about a wager." Fresh tears spilled from Violet's eyes. "Everyone will know by sundown," she whispered. "I'll never be able to show my face in Placitas again." Ryder was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "My ma had another saying," he finally offered. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, and sometimes he sends you running from what you thought you wanted so you can find what you truly need." A watery laugh escaped Violet's lips. "Your mother sounds wise." "Wisest woman I ever knew," Ryder agreed with a sad smile. "Lost her last winter." "I'm sorry," Violet said sincerely, momentarily forgetting her own troubles. "Life goes on," he said simply. Then, with a gentle determination in his voice, he added, "And yours will too, Miss Turner. Today feels like the end of everything, but I promise you this, there's joy waiting for you beyond this sorrow." Something in his steady gaze made Violet believe him, if only for a moment. Before she could respond, the sound of approaching voices made her tense. A group of townsfolk was coming down the street, no doubt looking for the runaway bride for their gossip. Ryder noticed her panic. "Come on," he said, standing and offering his hand. "I don't think you're ready to face the town just yet." Without thinking, Violet took his hand and let him lead her behind the stable to where his horse, a handsome chestnut gelding, was tethered. "I can take you home, or wherever you'd like to go," he offered. Violet hesitated. Going home meant facing her empty cabin, the one she'd been so eagerly preparing for married life. "I can't go home yet," she admitted, "but I don't want to impose." "It's no imposition," Ryder interrupted gently. "Consider it my good deed for the day." With surprising ease, he lifted her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. "Just tell me which direction," he said, his voice close to her ear. "The creek," Violet decided. "East of town, it's peaceful there." As they rode away from Placida's, Violet felt a strange sense of freedom mingling with her heartbreak. Arthur's betrayal still stung fiercely, but there was something comforting about the steady presence of the stranger behind her, the rhythm of the horse beneath them, and the open landscape ahead. At the creek, a ribbon of blue-green water cutting through the arid landscape, Ryder helped her down and tethered his horse to a cottonwood tree. Violet walked to the water's edge, her white dress gathering dust at the hem, no longer caring about preserving it. "You want to talk about it?" Ryder asked, keeping a respectful distance. Violet surprised herself by telling him everything: how she'd met Arthur Holloway when his family visited from Santa Fe, how charming he'd been, how he'd proposed after a whirlwind courtship. She told him about her parents' deaths from fever 3 years prior, leaving her alone with their modest cabin and sewing business. How she'd believed Arthur's promises of a better life, of love and security. "I was so blind," she concluded bitterly. "Everyone in town probably knew it was a sham." "Not everyone's as cruel as that fellow," Ryder said, "and being trusting isn't a sin, Miss Turner." "Violet," she corrected him. "After all this, I think you can call me Violet." He smiled, and she noticed a small dimple in his left cheek. "Violet, then." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the water flow. Ryder occasionally skipped stones across the surface, his aim impressive. "What brought you to Placida's?" Violet finally asked. "Work," he answered. "I've been drifting since the war ended, working cattle drives mostly. Heard there might be opportunities here at the Henderson Ranch." "Old man Henderson is always looking for good hands," Violet confirmed, "especially this time of year with the cattle drive to Santa Fe coming up." As they talked, the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Violet realized with a start that she'd spent hours with this stranger, and not once had he made her feel uncomfortable or pressured her for more than she was willing to share. "I should get back," she said reluctantly. "I can't hide forever." "No," Ryder agreed, standing and dusting off his trousers, "but you don't have to face them alone if you don't want to." The offer hung in the air between them, unexpected and tempting. "Why would you do that for me?" Violet asked. "You don't even know me." Ryder's expression turned serious. "My pa left us when I was 10, left my ma standing at the general store, promised to come right back. Never did." He shook his head. "I saw what that kind of betrayal does to a person. No one should have to face it alone." The simple honesty in his words touched Violet deeply. "Thank you," she said softly. The ride back to town was quiet, both lost in their thoughts. As they approached the outskirts of Placida's, Ryder spoke up. "Would you mind showing me to Henderson's ranch tomorrow?" "I'd like to apply for that job first thing." "I could," Violet agreed, grateful for the chance to repay his kindness. "Meet me at my cabin at sunrise. It's the small one with the blue door just past the smithy." "I'll be there," he promised. When they reached her cabin, Ryder helped her down from his horse. Standing on her small porch, Violet suddenly felt awkward in her wedding dress, the evidence of the day's humiliation still wrapped around her. "Ryder," she said hesitantly, "about what you said at the creek. About there being joy beyond this sorrow. Do you really believe that?" He looked at her steadily, his amber eyes reflecting the last light of day. "I do, and I promise you'll find it, Violet Turner." With that, he tipped his hat and rode off toward the small hotel at the center of town, leaving Violet with the strange sensation that despite everything, this terrible day might somehow lead to something good. True to his word, Ryder appeared at Violet's cabin at sunrise the next morning. She was waiting for him, dressed in her everyday clothes, a simple blue skirt and white blouse, her hair braided and pinned up neatly. She'd barely slept, but was determined not to show it. "Good morning," he greeted her, looking fresh and alert despite the early hour. "Good morning," she replied, locking her door. "It's about an hour's ride to Henderson's place. I thought we could stop at the general store first. I need to pick up some thread." What Violet didn't mention was that facing the town was a test she needed to pass, and having Ryder beside her made it seem possible. The general store was already busy with early shoppers when they arrived. As expected, conversations hushed when Violet entered, and curious eyes darted between her and the unfamiliar cowboy at her side. Mrs. Peterson, the storekeeper's wife and Placidas's most notorious gossip, practically tripped over herself coming to the counter. "Violet, dear," she cooed with false sympathy, "we were all so worried about you yesterday." "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Peterson," Violet said evenly, "but as you can see, I'm perfectly fine." Mrs. Peterson's eyes darted to Ryder. "And who might this gentleman be?" Ryder stepped forward, hat in hand, the picture of respectful charm. "Ryder Whitlock, madam, new to town and fortunate enough to make Miss Turner's acquaintance." Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows shot up. "Indeed," she murmured, clearly filing away this information for later distribution. Violet quickly purchased her thread and they left, feeling the weight of stairs on their backs. "That wasn't so bad," Ryder said as they mounted their horses, Violet on her own mare, which she'd retrieved from the neighbor who'd been watching it for her wedding day. "That was just the beginning," Violet predicted. "By noon, half the town will be speculating about us." Ryder shrugged, seemingly unbothered. "Let them talk, we know the truth." The ride to Henderson's ranch took them through beautiful country rolling hills dotted with juniper trees, the distant mountains providing a majestic backdrop. Along the way, Ryder told Violet more about himself, his childhood in Georgia, his service in the Confederate cavalry during the war, though he spoke of this briefly and with obvious discomfort, and his years drifting westward afterward. "What about your family?" Violet asked. "Any brothers or sisters?" "A brother," Ryder replied. "Thomas lost him at Gettysburg." Violet's heart ached for him. "I'm sorry." "Long time ago now," he said, though his eyes told a different story. "What about you?" "Always lived in Placidas, born and raised," she confirmed. "My father was the town's tailor. After he and my mother died, I took over the business. It's smaller now, just me doing mending and the occasional dress or shirt." "That wedding dress," Ryder said thoughtfully. "You made that yourself, didn't you?" Violet nodded, surprised he'd noticed. "How did you know?" "The stitching was too perfect for store-bought," he said simply. "My ma was handy with a needle too." They arrived at Henderson's ranch to find the old rancher himself out in the corral, watching a new Mustang being broken. George Henderson was a gruff man in his 60s, with a weathered face and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Turner," he greeted her with a nod. "Bit surprised to see you today, given the circumstances." Violet felt her cheeks warm but kept her composure. "Mr. Henderson, this is Ryder Whitlock. He's looking for work, and I heard you might be hiring for the drive." Henderson sized Ryder up with an experienced eye. "You handled cattle before, boy?" "Yes, sir," Ryder answered confidently. "Worked drives from Texas to Kansas 3 seasons running." "Can rope, ride, and brand with the best of them." Henderson grunted. "We'll see about that. Can you start today? 50 cents a day plus room and board." "Yes, sir," Ryder agreed readily. Henderson jerked his thumb toward the bunkhouse. "Get yourself settled. Franco will show you what needs doing." As Ryder moved to follow orders, he paused and turned to Violet. "Thank you for the introduction," he said. "Will I see you in town sometime?" Before Violet could answer, Henderson interrupted. "She comes by every Thursday to deliver my shirts. Does the finest darning in the territory." Ryder smiled at that. Thursday, then. As Violet rode back to town alone, she found herself looking forward to Thursday with an eagerness that both surprised and troubled her. Arthur's betrayal was still a raw wound. How could she already be thinking about another man? And yet, there was something about Ryder Whitlock that inspired trust. Perhaps it was just friendship she was feeling, she told herself. Nothing more. The following days were difficult. As predicted, gossip about the jilted bride spread through Placitas like wildfire. Violet endured pitying looks, whispered comments, and the occasional direct question about her well-being with as much dignity as she could muster. She threw herself into her work, grateful for the distraction of needle and thread. Thursday came, and Violet found herself taking extra care with her appearance before riding out to Henderson's ranch with his mended shirts. She told herself it was just professional pride, but the flutter in her stomach when she spotted Ryder by the corral told a different story. He saw her approach and broke into a wide smile that made his amber eyes crinkle at the corners. In just a few days, he already looked at home on the ranch, his skin a shade darker from working in the sun, his movements confident as he crossed to meet her. "Miss Turner," he greeted her, taking the reins of her horse as she dismounted. Thursday came none too soon. "Mr. Whitlock," she returned, fighting her own smile, "I see you're settling in well." "Henderson works a man hard, but he's fair," Ryder confirmed. "And the country around here grows on you fast." They walked together toward the main house where Violet would deliver Henderson's shirts. Their conversation flowed easily, as if they'd known each other for years instead of days. "The boys are taking me into town Saturday night," Ryder mentioned as they reached the porch. "Would you? That is, I was wondering if you might be willing to join me for supper at the hotel restaurant." Violet hesitated. Dining together in public would certainly set tongues wagging even more. Yet the hopeful look in Ryder's eyes made it hard to refuse. "I'd like that," she found herself saying, "but people will talk." Ryder's expression turned serious. "Violet, I need to be honest with you. I don't care what people say. I've enjoyed your company more in the few days I've known you than I have anyone's in a long time, but if you're not ready, given what happened last week, I understand completely." His consideration touched her deeply. 7 o'clock, she decided. "I'll meet you there." His smile returned, brighter than before. "I'll be counting the hours." Saturday evening found Violet standing before her small mirror, smoothing the skirt of her best dress, a deep green that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. Her honey-brown hair was arranged in soft curls that framed her face, a style that had taken considerable effort. "This is not a courtship," she told her reflection firmly. "Just two friends sharing a meal." Even as she said it, she knew she was lying to herself. There was something special about Ryder Whitlock, something that made her feel safe and valued in a way Arthur never had, despite his flowery compliments and grand promises. The hotel restaurant was the nicest establishment in Placitas, which wasn't saying much, just a room adjacent to the saloon with actual tablecloths, and a cook who'd once worked in a fine St. Louis establishment before drink brought him west. When Violet entered, Ryder was already waiting, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in a clean shirt and his best trousers, his usually tousled brown hair neatly combed. He stood when he saw her, his expression making her glad she'd taken such care with her appearance. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy. "You clean up rather well yourself." They ordered the house specialty beef stew and fresh bread and talked through the meal about everything and nothing. Ryder told her about the upcoming cattle drive to Santa Fe, and Violet shared stories of growing up in Placitas. Neither mentioned Arthur or the wedding that wasn't, yet his presence lingered like a ghost between them. As they finished their apple pie, Ryder cleared his throat. "Violet, there's something I should tell you." Her heart skipped anxiously. "Yes, I saw your former fiancé in town today with some friends from Santa Fe." Violet's stomach dropped. "Arthur's still here," Ryder nodded grimly. "Apparently staying through next week for some business deal." His friends were quite vocal about the wedding incident at the saloon. Humiliation washed over Violet anew. "What did they say?" "Nothing worth repeating," Ryder said firmly, "but I want you to know that I may have said some things in your defense that weren't entirely gentlemanly." Despite herself, Violet smiled. "Did you now?" "I might have suggested that any man fool enough to let you go deserved to be horsewhipped for stupidity alone," Ryder admitted, looking both embarrassed and defiant. A laugh bubbled up from Violet's chest, the first real laugh since that terrible day at the church. I would have paid good money to see Arthur's face. It was quite a picture, Ryder agreed, relaxing at her reaction, though I should warn you, he didn't take kindly to my interference. Called me some choice names. I'm sorry you've been drawn into my drama, Violet said sincerely. Ryder reached across the table and briefly touched her hand. Don't be. Some things are worth standing up for. The warmth of his fingers lingered on her skin long after he withdrew them. As they left the restaurant, stepping into the cool evening air, Violet felt lighter than she had in weeks. They walked slowly toward her cabin, enjoying the night and each other's company. As they passed the saloon, however, the door swung open, spilling light and raucous laughter into the street along with Arthur Holloway and 3 companions. Arthur stopped short when he saw Violet, his handsome face twisting into a sneer. Well, if it isn't my almost bride, he drawled, clearly having had several drinks. And her cowboy protector. Ryder stepped slightly in front of Violet, his posture tense but controlled. Evening, Holloway, we're just passing by. Didn't take you long to find a replacement, did it, Violet? Arthur continued as if Ryder hadn't spoken. Though I must say, your standards have fallen considerably. From a businessman's son to a saddle tramp, Violet felt anger replace her initial fear. Mr. Whitlock has shown me more genuine kindness in 1 week than you did in 3 months, Arthur. Now please let us pass. Arthur's friends snickered, egging him on. Kindness, is it? Is that what they're calling it these days? I wonder what else he's shown you. Ryder's hands clenched into fists, but before he could respond, Violet stepped forward. You know nothing about me or Mr. Whitlock, she said evenly. You never did. You saw a naive girl you could use for a bet, nothing more. I feel sorry for you, Arthur Holloway, because you'll never know what it means to truly care for someone beyond what they can do for you. Arthur's face darkened with anger. You little, I wouldn't finish that sentence if I were you, Ryder interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. Miss Turner has said her piece. We'll be on our way now. He offered his arm to Violet, who took it gratefully. They walked away, ignoring Arthur's continued taunts until they turned the corner and were out of sight. I'm sorry, Ryder said once they were alone. I should have taken a different route. No, Violet replied firmly. I'm glad it happened. I needed to face him to say what I said. Ryder looked down at her with admiration. You were magnificent. They continued to her cabin in comfortable silence, both processing the confrontation. At her door, Violet turned to face Ryder, suddenly nervous. Would you like to come in for coffee? She asked, the invitation surprising even herself. Ryder hesitated. Are you sure? People might talk, Violet finished for him. They already are, and right now I don't particularly care. Inside, the cabin was small but cozy, with neat furnishings and touches of Violet's handiwork everywhere, from the embroidered cushions to the patchwork quilt on the rocking chair. Ryder looked around appreciatively while Violet prepared coffee on her small stove. You've made a real home here, he commented. It was my parents', Violet explained, bringing 2 steaming cups to the table. After they died, I couldn't bear to leave it. They sat across from each other, the lamplight casting a warm glow over their faces. Ryder seemed deep in thought, turning his cup in his large, calloused hands. What are you thinking about? Violet asked softly. About how different you are from what I expected when I first saw you crying on that bench, he admitted. You're stronger than you know, Violet Turner. His words touched something deep inside her. I don't feel strong most days. Yet here you are, he pointed out, standing your ground, facing down the man who humiliated you, building your life on your own terms. What about you? Violet asked, wanting to shift the focus. You've been drifting for years. Don't you ever want to settle somewhere? Ryder's expression turned thoughtful. I used to think I was looking for the right place, he said slowly. Now I'm starting to wonder if I was really looking for the right reason to stop moving. The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Violet felt her heart quicken. It was too soon, she told herself. They barely knew each other, and yet... Ryder, she began, not sure what she wanted to say. I should go, he interrupted gently, standing. It's getting late, and I have early duties tomorrow. Violet walked him to the door, conflicted emotions warring within her. At the threshold, Ryder turned to her, his amber eyes serious in the lamplight. "I meant what I said that first day, Violet. There's joy waiting for you beyond that sorrow." I just... He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "I just hope I might be part of that joy when you're ready." Before she could respond, he leaned down and brushed his lips against her cheek, the gesture so gentle and respectful that tears sprang to Violet's eyes. "Good night," he whispered, and then he was gone, walking back toward town in the moonlight. Violet touched her cheek where his lips had been, a smile spreading across her face despite the tears. For the first time since Arthur's betrayal, she felt a flicker of hope, not just that she would survive this pain, but that something beautiful might grow from it. The weeks that followed were transformative for Violet. The gossip about the failed wedding gradually died down as the townsfolk found new scandals to discuss. More importantly, Violet found herself caring less and less what others thought. Ryder rode out with the Henderson outfit for the cattle drive to Santa Fe, which would take nearly 2 weeks. Before leaving, he'd come to see her, promising to return and take her on a proper outing when he got back. The anticipation of his return gave Violet a new energy, and she channeled it into her work, creating designs for dresses and shirts that were more ambitious than anything she'd attempted before. When Arthur Holloway and his friends finally left Placitas to return to Santa Fe, Violet barely noticed. The man who had once consumed her thoughts now seemed like a stranger, and a rather pathetic one at that. Mrs. Johnson, the banker's wife and one of Violet's best customers, noticed the change during a fitting for a new Sunday dress. "You seem different lately, Violet," she observed. "There's a light back in your eyes that's been missing." Violet smiled as she pinned the hem. "I suppose I am different, Mrs. Johnson. Sometimes the worst days of our lives lead us to the best." "This wouldn't have anything to do with that handsome cowboy who stood up for you in the saloon, would it?" Mrs. Johnson asked with a knowing smile. "My husband said it was quite the speech he gave." Heat rose to Violet's cheeks. "Mr. Whitlock has been a good friend when I needed one." Mrs. Johnson murmured, unconvinced. "Friends are wonderful things indeed." The day Ryder was due to return from the cattle drive, Violet found herself watching the road from her window, unable to concentrate on her sewing. When she finally spotted Ryder's approaching town, she forced herself to sit back down at her work table, determined not to appear too eager. An hour later, a knock at her door sent her heart racing. She smoothed her hair, took a deep breath, and opened it to find Ryder standing there, trail-worn but grinning broadly. "Miss Turner," he greeted her, hat in hand. "I believe I promised you an outing when I returned." Violet couldn't help matching his smile. "You did indeed, Mr. Whitlock. I hope you're proposing something that will allow you time to wash the trail dust off first." He laughed, the sound warming her from the inside out. "How does a picnic by the creek tomorrow sound? I've been dreaming of that spot since we left." "Perfect," she agreed. "I'll prepare the food." "And I'll provide the company," he promised, his eyes lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary before he tipped his hat and turned to go. Noon tomorrow, then. The picnic by the creek was everything Violet had hoped for. The late summer day was gloriously warm but not oppressive, with a gentle breeze rustling the cottonwood leaves overhead. Ryder arrived promptly at noon, looking refreshed and handsome in clean clothes, his hair still damp from washing. They spread a blanket by the water and unpacked the basket Violet had prepared: fried chicken, cornbread, apple pie, and a jar of sweet tea. As they ate, Ryder told her about the cattle drive, the long days, the skittish cattle, the camaraderie among the men. "Henderson offered me a permanent position," he mentioned casually as they finished their meal. "Head wrangler. His current man is moving to California come winter." Violet's heart leapt at the news. "That's wonderful. Will you accept?" Ryder looked at her steadily. "I'm considering it." "It would mean putting down roots after a long time of drifting." "And is that something you want?" Violet asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. "It is," he confirmed, "for the right reasons." He reached across the blanket and took her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "Violet, I know we haven't known each other long, and I know you've been hurt. I don't want to rush you or pressure you in any way, but I need you to know that these past weeks, getting to know you, have been the best of my life." Violet's breath caught in her throat. "Ryder, let me finish," he said softly. "I'm not asking for anything right now except the chance to court you properly, to show you that not all men are like Arthur Holloway, that some of us mean what we say and keep our promises." Tears welled in Violet's eyes, but unlike those she'd shed on that bench when they first met, these were born of happiness rather than despair. "I'd like that very much," she whispered. Ryder's smile could have lit the night sky. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle and questioning at first, then deeper as Violet responded, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest. When they finally broke apart, both a little breathless, Ryder rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the moment I saw you in that wedding dress," he confessed. Violet laughed, the sound bright and joyful. "Even with my eyes all red and swollen." "Even then," he assured her, "you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen." In that moment, by the creek where they'd first begun to know each other, Violet realized that Ryder had been right that terrible day. There was indeed joy waiting beyond her sorrow, a joy far deeper and truer than anything she'd known before. Over the months that followed, Ryder courted Violet with a steadfast devotion that won over even the most skeptical townsfolk. He took the position as Henderson's head wrangler and rented a small house at the edge of town, close enough to both the ranch and Violet's cabin for frequent visits. Their courtship was unhurried and sweet. Ryder brought her wildflowers and helped repair her leaky roof. Violet sewed him shirts that fit his broad shoulders perfectly and packed his lunch on long workdays. They attended church together, rode through the countryside on Sundays, and slowly, carefully, built a foundation of trust and respect that deepened their growing love. Winter came to Placida's, bringing crackling fires and early evenings spent reading aloud from Violet's small collection of books. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside, Ryder asked Violet to marry him. "Not because I want to rush you," he assured her, holding both her hands in his as they sat before her fireplace. "But because I can't imagine my life without you in it. I love you, Violet Turner. Will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Tears of happiness spilled down Violet's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Ryder." Their wedding the following spring was everything Violet's first, almost wedding had not been: simple, sincere, and filled with genuine joy. She wore a new dress of pale blue instead of white, adorned with delicate embroidery she'd worked on through the winter evenings. Ryder stood tall and proud at the altar, his amber eyes never leaving hers as they spoke their vows. And when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ryder gently wiped away the happy tears that spilled from Violet's eyes, just as he had that first day on the bench outside the livery. "I told you there was joy waiting for you," he murmured as he leaned in to kiss his bride. "You did," Violet agreed, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "And you kept your promise." 5 years later, on their anniversary, Violet and Ryder Whitlock sat on the porch of their ranch house, a modest but comfortable home they'd built on land purchased from Old Man Henderson when he decided to retire to Santa Fe. Their 3-year-old son Thomas played in the yard with his wooden horse, his laughter carrying on the spring breeze, while baby Rose slept in a cradle nearby. "Do you ever think about it?" Ryder asked, his arm around Violet's shoulders. "That day when we met." Violet leaned against her husband, watching their son's antics with a contented smile. "Sometimes," she admitted. "It's hard to believe now, but at the time I thought my life was over." "And now?" Ryder prompted. Violet turned to look at him, taking in the face she loved so well, the laugh lines deeper now, a touch of gray at his temples, but those amber eyes still as warm and kind as the day he'd offered her his handkerchief. "Now I know it was just beginning," she said softly. "That day when my groom laughed at my tears, I thought I'd never be happy again. I couldn't see that the greatest joy of my life was sitting right beside me on that bench, promising me that everything would be all right." Ryder pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. Best promise I ever made, he murmured, and the easiest to keep. As the sun set over the New Mexico landscape, painting the distant mountains in gold and purple, Violet Whitlock gave thanks for unanswered prayers and the mysterious ways of fate. The path to happiness had not been the one she'd planned, but it had led her exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of the man who had wiped away her tears and replaced them with a joy beyond anything she could have imagined.